The sky above Virelanine was always purple, filled with floating lights and blinking sky trains that moved like snakes through the clouds. Inside one of the tallest towers, a young alien girl named Keoli sat alone in her quiet apartment. She was tired of silence, tired of empty rooms, tired of bills piling up on the table. So, she opened her holopad, typed out a message, and posted it to the city board, looking for a roommate. Clean, quiet, no species preference, rent split 50/50ths. Available immediately, she expected a female from her own kind. Or maybe a soft-skinned plant type who wouldn't bother her much. She definitely didn't expect what happened next. The door chimed just 3 hours later. Keoli wore a long robe, her gray skin glowing faintly, and her short antennae twitched. With mild annoyance, she walked over, tapped the security screen, then froze. Standing outside her apartment was a human male, tall, dusty, and wearing a half-broken jacket with military patches. She blinked, thinking maybe it was a mistake. Name? She asked through the intercom. Ray, he answered, his voice calm but tired. I saw your ad. I need a room. You're human, she said slowly, confused. He nodded once, still breathing though. Can I come in? Keoli hesitated, her hand hovering over the door button. Humans were not banned in Virelanine, but they weren't welcome either. The war had ended, but fear and mistrust remained, letting one inside. That was crazy, and yet? She pressed the button, the door slid open with a soft hiss. Ray stepped inside slowly, eyes scanning everything, but his hands remained visible, respectful. Keoli stared at him. He looked strong, but not aggressive. There was a scar running from his temple to his neck, and a faded burn on his hand. This man had seen battle, maybe too much of it. You can leave your boots there, she said, pointing to a small rack. He nodded again, quietly obeying. Then he looked at her and said, Thank you. That surprised her more than anything. She didn't expect manners, not from a human. I'll give you 3 days, she said quickly. Trial period. No promises, fair, he replied, placing a small pack on the floor over the next hour. Keoli watched him from behind the kitchen wall. He moved carefully, unpacked only a few things: clothes, a cracked datapad, a small photo of a woman and child. He didn't say much. Just sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room and stared out the window. That night, as the city lights glowed outside, Keoli couldn't sleep. She kept listening for sounds, movement, threats, anything. But Ray made no noise. She peeked into his room once, just to be sure. He was lying on his back, one arm over his eyes, his body tense even while resting. She didn't understand him. Why would a human soldier want to share a room with a stranger from a planet that once fought against Earth? Was he hiding, running, dangerous, or just tired? In the morning, she made herself some warm broth. Ray came out, nodded politely, and started fixing the broken screen on the kitchen wall without asking. She blinked again. This human didn't talk much, but he did things, and the screen worked better now. Thanks, she muttered. No problem, he said, without looking up. They spent most of the day apart. But that night, Keoli heard something strange. A soft sound, broken breathing. Then a small cry, almost like a child. She crept to his room and peeked through the cracked door. Ray was shaking in his sleep, whispering something, gripping the bedsheet like it was a weapon. Don't leave them. Please, not again. He whispered, tears on his face. Kylie stood frozen. This was not a monster. This was a broken man. Something inside her shifted. The next morning, she put a small blanket over the couch where he liked to sit. She didn't say anything about his nightmare, and he didn't mention it either. But the silence between them felt different, less cold, more like two people standing in the same storm. That night, she looked at the city again, the lights, the noise. the movement, and thought, maybe this human wasn't such a mistake after all. Ray didn't ask for much, and he didn't speak much either. He only took one plate, one blanket, and one chair by the window where he sat quietly every night. But Keely was not used to humans, and this one made her nervous in strange ways. He didn't behave like other species she had met. He didn't stare at her like the others. Didn't ask her about her glowing skin, her sharp nails, or the way her antenna moved when she was annoyed. He just minded his own business. Like he had lived alone for years. On the third day, Keely prepared a small list of house rules. She printed them on a hologram and stuck it to the wall right outside his room. No loud sounds after sunset. No human meat in the food cooler. No touching her private meditation stones. Ray read the list with a small grin on his face and nodded once. "Anything else?" he asked. "Just don't die in the shower," she said flatly. Walking past him noted, he replied, chuckling under his breath. It wasn't meant to be funny. But the sound of his laughter was soft, almost warm, that night as she lay on her bed. Her mind kept returning to the look on his face when he smiled. It wasn't charming, not really, but it was honestly to that week. Strange things began to happen in the building. Doors opened by themselves. Lights flickered, even when there was no power cut. Keely didn't think much of it at first, until a neighbor came knocking. It was Jorik, a bulky alien who worked for building security. He sniffed the air like a beast and looked past Keely's shoulder into the apartment you've taken in a human, he said with suspicion. Keely folded her arms and narrowed her eyes. "He's my cousin, part human, part Tavari." She lied quickly. Jorik snorted. "Your cousin smells like plasma burns and gun oil." She didn't move. He stepped closer. "You know what they say about humans, right? One day they act quiet. The next day, they burn down your house." "I'll take my chances," she replied coldly. "Thank you for your concern." Jorik left. But his eyes said the conversation wasn't over. Keely closed the door. Heart racing. Ray had been listening from behind the curtain when she turned. He was already walking away. "I'll leave if you want," he said quietly. She didn't answer for a moment. "You've already seen the rent." She muttered finally, "Stay out of trouble." He nodded and returned to his corner without another word. The next evening, a small shockwave passed through the building. Nothing major, just a tremor from the nearby shipyard test. But when the lights flickered, Keely panicked and reached out. Her hand landed on Ray's arm for a moment. Neither of them moved. His skin was warm, rough like sand, and her hand glowed faintly against it. He looked at her, and something unspoken passed between them. She pulled her hand back quickly and turned away. "Sorry," she whispered. "It's all right," he said gently. That night, he cooked something strange, thick, spicy, and red. The smell filled the kitchen. Keely walked in, her nose twitching. "What is that?" "Earth stew," he said. "Don't worry, no meat, just roots and heat." She tasted one spoon, then another. It was better than anything she had eaten all week. Later, while cleaning, she saw something under his bed, a small metal box, locked with a code. She didn't touch it, but she couldn't stop thinking about it either. What was a human like him hiding? That night, Ray sat by the window again. His eyes stared at the stars like he was looking for someone who never came back, and Keely, standing quietly by the kitchen door, felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not fear, not suspicion, something stranger. She didn't have a name for it yet, but whatever it was, it had already begun. 3 days passed, then 5, then a full week. Ray stayed quiet, always respectful. Never crossed any lines. He didn't ask questions, didn't snoop, and never touched anything that wasn't his. Still, Keely couldn't relax completely. There was something about the way he moved, calm, watchful like a soldier still waiting for an attack that never came. On the 7th night, the building security system flashed red for a few seconds. It was just a scan check, But the moment the alarm chirped, Ray froze in place. His hand went straight to his boot, where he kept a small, hidden blade. Keely saw it and whispered, "You're still wired for war." He said nothing. Just placed the blade back like it was nothing new. Later, while she made tea, she asked him quietly, "Why are you really here?" Ray didn't answer right away. He leaned on the wall, arms crossed, his eyes darker than usual. Then he said, "Because there's nowhere else to go." Keely didn't push further, but that night, she sent a private message to her cousin, who worked in the city records. Find anything on a human named Ray who arrived in Viralani in the last 3 months. She didn't expect much. Maybe just an old job file or transit ID. But the answer came fast. Made her cold all over classified entry. Movement flagged. Subject marked as possible fugitive. War criminal or data thief. Handle with care. She dropped her holopad. War criminal. Ray. The same man who gave her his last clean glass, who fixed her heater with no tools. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she stood outside his room for hours, trying to decide what to do. Turn him in. Call the guards. Ask him to leave. But the only thing she did was whisper, "Why did you lie to me?" There was no answer from inside, just soft breathing. The next day, someone new arrived at the building. An alien female in a tight black suit with long metal fingers and unreadable eyes. She wore no ID badge, no crest, nothing that said where she was from. But Keely Santana twitched with warning the moment their eyes met. The woman came up to her during mail pickup and spoke without moving her lips much. "I hear you have a human guest." Keely narrowed her eyes. No guest here, just wrenching silence. The woman smiled. "A slow, cold thing. Watch your doors, girl. Some species carry more weight than others." Then she walked away, vanishing into the elevator with no sound. When Kylie returned to the apartment, Ray was already waiting by the window. He had seen her. "You've been asking about me?" he said quietly. "You're hiding something." She replied, her voice low. He didn't deny it. He walked into his room, opened the metal box under his bed, and brought it to her. He placed it on the table and entered the code slowly. Inside was a crystal glowing green, humming with energy, not human-made, not from any species Keely recognized. "This," he said, "is what I stole." "What is it?" She whispered. "Proof," he said. "Proof that the war wasn't what they told us." Kylie stared at the crystal like it might explode. "What kind of proof?" He looked out the window again. "Everything," he said. "Who started it? Who betrayed who? Who sold out Earth to save their own skins? You're telling me this now?" She asked. "I didn't plan to," he said. "But I think someone's coming. And I don't want you caught in it." Keely stepped back, hands trembling. "If the city finds out, they'll take you and me." Ray nodded. "That's why." "I'll leave tonight," he said. "I'll take the crystal and disappear." But she didn't want him to leave. She didn't know why. But the thought of him gone made her feel colder than the sky outside. "You should have told me earlier." She said, "I thought you'd hate me," he answered. She stared at him for a long moment, and then, for the first time since he arrived, she said softly, "I don't." Outside, the sky flickered as another storm rolled in. But inside that small apartment, a strange new alliance had begun, made of secrets, danger, and something neither of them could name yet. The storm hit hard that night, lightning flashing through the high windows like electric knives. Rain poured over the city domes, and the wind made the tower walls groan like tired animals. Inside the apartment, Keely sat on the couch, holding the crystal in her hands. Its glow pulsed softly, almost like a heartbeat. Ray stood near the window, watching the sky as if something might come from it any second. "Where did you get it?" she finally asked. Ray didn't move. "I took it from a ship," he said. "During the last days of the war, we found a command vessel that wasn't supposed to be there." "Whose ship?" "Not ours," he said. "Not yours either." He turned and looked at her. "Have you ever heard of the Xerix Protocol?" She shook her head. "They made it look like humans attacked first," he said slowly. "But the truth is, your leaders signed off on it. They sacrificed a human colony in exchange for protection." Kylie's face grew pale. "That's not true," she whispered. "It's in that crystal." He said, "Recordings, conversations, orders, all of it." He looked tired, not just in body, but in his soul. "I thought if I could get it to the right people, maybe something would change," he continued. "But no one wanted it. Not even my own side." Keely placed the crystal down gently, everything she had learned growing up. Every history lesson, every speech about bravery and honor, it all started to feel like a lie. She stared at Ray and said, "You're not just a soldier. You're a witness." Ray didn't reply. Instead, he walked over to a drawer and pulled out a folded piece of cloth. It was an old flag, Earth's flag, burned at the edges. "Stained with dust, I kept it," he said softly, "even when we lost." Everything. Keely didn't know what to say. She had never seen a human flag before. Only pictures. Now one lay just inches away, held by a man who had watched his planet fall and still carried the memory like armor. They sat in silence for a long time, no words, just the sound of rain and thunder. Eventually, Keely got up and made 2 cups of hot broth. She handed one to Ray. Without a word, he nodded in thanks that night. She didn't go back to her room. Instead, she sat on the other side of the couch, far but near, and stayed there until the sun rose. When the light returned to the sky, she looked at Ray, still awake, still quiet. He hadn't slept at all. "You should rest," she said. "Can't," he replied. She gave him a look, then stood. "I'll keep watch," she said simply. For a moment, Ray didn't respond. Then, for the first time, he closed his eyes and slept. Keely stood by the window, holding the crystal again. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one thing now. This man, this human, was not her enemy. For the first time in her life, she hoped the universe was wrong. The next morning, something felt different in the air. The storm had passed, but the sky was gray, quiet and heavy. Keely walked through the apartment slowly, as if waiting for something to jump out of the shadows. Ray was still asleep on the couch, his arms crossed tightly, breathing steady. She stared at him for a moment longer than she meant to. He looked younger when he slept, less like a soldier, more like someone who had lost too much, too fast. She turned away and began to clean the place, needing to keep her hands busy. She lifted his blanket to fold it, and noticed something strange underneath the couch. A small metal device, smooth and oval-shaped, blinking faintly with a red light. She picked it up carefully. It wasn't from her world, and it wasn't part of the crystal tech either. The moment she touched it, a warning flashed across its surface. Trigger active. Her heart skipped. Ray was being tracked. Or, worse, someone had planted this in their apartment without them knowing. She rushed to the kitchen and splashed water on his face. He shot up instantly, eyes sharp, hand grabbing for the knife near his side. "It's me," she said quickly. "We have a problem." She held up the tracker, and his face turned pale. "That wasn't mine," he said. "Standing fast, I know," she replied. "That means they found you." Ray stared at the blinking light. "I have to go," he said, already grabbing his things, but Keely stepped in front of him. "Not like this," she said. "Not alone." He looked at her, surprised. "You'd help me escape?" "You showed me the truth," she said, her voice steady. "And now they want to bury it." She opened a drawer and pulled out something she hadn't touched in years, her old family crest. A silver badge with glowing blue marks. It still held some command power in the lower districts. "You'll need this to get past the outer checkpoints," she said, handing it to him. Ray looked at the badge, then at her. "This means you lose your status," he warned. "I already lost it the day I let a human sleep under my roof," she whispered with a half-smile. They packed quickly. Ray wrapped the crystal in cloth and placed it inside a hidden pocket in his jacket, keyly loaded. Her old passcodes onto a chip and tucked it inside her armband. Just as they reached the door, the building shook a low rumble from below. Like something big was powering up, Ray peeked out through the side window. A dark vehicle floated just outside the tower, no markings, no lights, just silent death waiting there here. He said quietly. Keely didn't speak. She grabbed his hand, pulled him back into the apartment, and opened the hidden service tunnel that led to the waste shaft. No one uses this, she said. It's dirty and illegal, but it's our only chance. Ray didn't argue. They climbed down together. Passing old pipes and flickering lights, water dripped from the ceiling, and rats the size of fists scurried past their feet, but they kept going down deeper. Until they reached the access hatch that led to the underground tram, Lanikially inserted the crest into the panel. The door opened with a hiss. Ray turned to her. Eyes serious. You don't have to come, he said. She punched him in the arm, not hard. But enough, shut up and move, she said. Trying not to smile, they stepped into the dark tram tunnel behind them. The hatch closed, and above them, Death waited, confused. Looking in the wrong direction. They were not safe yet, not even close. But now they were moving together, and the box that held the truth the crystal Ray risked everything for was still glowing faintly, still waiting to change the galaxy. The tram tunnel stretched for miles beneath Verelanine. Old tracks cracked under their boots, and the air was thick with dust and oil. Keely held a dim light in her hand, while Ray led the way with a small scanner that beeped softly every few seconds. The scanner wasn't tracking enemies, it was searching for exits. They needed a way out before the guards above caught their trail. Clee's lungs burned. But she kept moving behind them. Nothing could be heard, but she knew something was coming, not loud, not fast, but slow, quiet and deadly. It always worked like that in this city. Ray paused and looked back. You all right? As she said. Though her legs trembled, they turned a corner and reached an old maintenance station. Metal benches, cracked screens, and a rusted vending machine greeted them like ghosts from the past. This was my home once, Keely whispered. Ray looked around. You lived here? She nodded slowly. My family lost everything after the war. We stayed here until the government pushed us out. She sat down on the bench, wiped sweat from her forehead. Ray sat beside her, silence thick between them. After a moment, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the crystal. Agankily stared at it. You really believe this thing will change anything? She asked. Ray held it up to the faint light. No, he said. But it might make people ask the right questions. Keely leaned back, her voice softer now. My people won't believe it even if it screams the truth in their face. Ray turned to her, his eyes tired but firm. Then I'll make sure they hear it in every corner of the galaxy. His voice didn't shake, and that made her believe him before she could reply. The scanner beeped loudly. Ray snapped it up, eyes wide, movement 200 meters and closing fast. Keely stood quickly. Not rats this time, she said. No, he replied, pulling his small blaster from his boot. This is something else. They ran down another tunnel. No time to argue or plan, just run behind them. Soft footsteps echoed, and then a hiss-low, mechanical, sharp. Keely's antenna twitched. A hunter draunch. She'd only seen them once, but she remembered the way they moved fast, like shadow smart, like assassins, and deadly. Like war. Ray turned and fired a shot down the tunnel. The sound shook the air. A screech followed, metal hitting stone. They had seconds. Keely saw a door to the side, small and half buried here. She shouted. They pushed through and slammed it behind them, locking it tight. The room was dark. It smelled like chemicals and moldry. Caught his breath and leaned against the wall. Keely's hands trembled. She looked at him and whispered, They want the crystal? Ray nodded. And if they get it, the truth dies with it. She stared at him. Heart pounding. We'll never make it to the outer port, she said. He looked at her. Then we changed the plan. He pulled a small chip from His jacket, this is a copy, he said, of the data. She asked. He nodded. You had a backup all along. Always. He said. He handed it to her. You know this city better than I do. He said, you're smarter, faster. I don't make it. You give this to the broadcast towers, Keely. Look down at the chip, then back at him. You're not dying. She said firmly. Ray smiled faintly. You're starting to sound like a soldier. Suddenly, the wall behind them cracked. A thin needle shot through, missing Keely's ear. By inches, the drone had found them. Ray shoved her toward a side pipe. Go. He yelled. She hesitated. Not without you. I'll hold it off. Go. Keely screamed in frustration, but obeyed. She crawled through the pipe. Clutching the chip behind her, blaster shots echoed a shout, then silence. She didn't stop. Not until she reached the light at the end of the pipe. Not until she breathed. The outside air again. Tears ran down her face as she looked back into the dark tunnel. Ray was gone, but his mission wasn't end now. It was in her hands. The wind outside the tunnel was sharp and cold. Keely pulled herself out of the pipe, her clothes torn, her hands bleeding, but the chip still clutched tightly in her fist. She stood in the lowest part of the city, the underworld slums, where machines coughed smoke and broken ships lined the alleys like graves. No one looked twice at her. That was good. Her heart was still pounding. She didn't know if Ray was alive or dead. But she had a mission now. She had the truth, and it had to reach the world. She wrapped the chip in cloth and tucked it deep into her belt. Then she ran through old train lines, through junkyards and markets, through silent zones where even the guards didn't go. By nightfall, she reached the edge of the broadcast tower. The tower rose like a black spear into the sky, surrounded by electric fences and patrol bots. The front was impossible to get through, but Keely remembered an old trick from her childhood. She crawled through a waste pipe that led under the fence. Then she climbed the maintenance rails, one hand at a time, until her arms felt like they'd fall off. But she didn't stop, not now. To the top, there was a small emergency port, forgotten access point used by old workers. She plugged the chip into the port. Her fingers shaking, the screen blinked. Upload, ready. She hesitated. One press, and she'd be hunted forever. One press, and Ray's sacrifice would matter. She took a breath and pressed the button. The upload began. At first, nothing happened. Then the sky shimmered across the city. Public screens turned blue. The voice of a human general played. Then alien leaders speaking in secret. Then files, videos, maps, evidence of betrayal. People all across Viralanine stopped in their tracks. Some gasped. Some cried. Some got angry, but no one could unsee it. Keely stepped back from the panel, her eyes wet. It was done just then. A voice behind her said, "You really did it." She turned fast. Ray stood there, bleeding, limping, burned, but alive. One arm was wrapped in cloth, the other holding a broken blaster. He smiled. "You didn't run." She walked over to him slowly. "I thought you died." "I almost did," he said. "But I kept thinking you'd be alone." She hit him in the chest softly. "You idiot," she whispered. The sound of engines filled the air. Guards were coming. Ships circling the tower like sharks, but something was different now. The people had seen the truth, and in that moment, a single ship broke through the clouds, painted with the mark of a rebel faction that had long been silent. Its doors opened. A voice crackled through the speaker. "Human, alien, both of you get in. You're not alone anymore." Keely looked at Ray. He nodded. They ran to the ship and jumped in as the engines roared, as the city grew smaller beneath them. Ray sat back, eyes closed, a small smile on his face. "You saved the galaxy." She whispered. "No," he said. "You did." Keely looked down at the city below. Her old life was gone. Her status, her safety vanished, but sitting beside her was someone who gave her a reason to believe. Again, maybe it started with a roommate ad, but it ended with hope, and that was more powerful than any war.